Look at that. Look at that deli meat. That is a wild vegan ham. Now this like ham recipe that we're working on today is based off of a Vietnamese pork recipe called cha lua che. Now cha lua is like a minced ham that's kind of like all minced up, seasoned, and then just put back together. And essentially we've done the same thing, except we've done it with soy skin. So let's get going. There's only a few steps to this, but it does take overnight. You do have to let it rest for quite a while for that mixture to really form up. Most of the time that's involved in this is resting time. The other few bits is boiling time. I'm gonna be using like a specific tool to make this, and I'll leave a link in the description below for Amazon. It's fairly cheap, but you could also make it by hand, and I'll show you that as well. This one's gonna be a lot of fun. I'm excited about this video. Okay, first things first, to make this ham out of tofu and dried soy skin, we're gonna have to do a little bit of preparation. We just need to drain and press our tofu. I'm gonna be using a tofu press just to kind of press this over the edge. We're not worried about pressing this gently because we're going to be mashing this up once it's done. I'm gonna be using a firm tofu for this. I think any tofu will work, honestly. I think any of them will. I want firm bits of tofu in my ham as like the marbling. So that's why we're gonna be using firm instead of like say like a medium or a soft. Next up, we're gonna work on our soy skin. Now I have 250 gram dried soy skin packages here, so we're about 300 grams, a little bit less than a pound. This should make 2 logs. Realistically, all I'm gonna be focusing on today is making one using a very specific tool. But I'll show you the way to make the second ham log, which is gonna be fairly easy. But first up, we need to make our broth. So to get our broth going, we're gonna be using about 4 to 6 cups of water, depending on the size of your saucepan. Then we're gonna add 1 tablespoon of mushroom seasoning and 1 teaspoon of nutritional yeast to the broth, and we're gonna bring that up to a simmer. And then we also dropped in a few of our vegan, it's like a vegan pink food coloring. It's like I think it's the Wilton gel. I just saw on the brand that it was vegan. So make sure you take a look at your food coloring because most, like 99.9% of red food colorings are not vegan. You can't use beet powder in this one because we're gonna cook it before you see it. So it will turn gray before you ever get a chance to actually see the pink color. And we want this to be a little pink. It should have a slightly pink hue to it, which is what's gonna really give it that ham look. So now that this water is coming up to a simmer, we're gonna start shredding these soy sheets and adding the shredded material right into the water. This should shred fairly easy. We're gonna shred probably about 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch size lines out of this. And then just like I said, just throw it right in the water and let it simmer up for about 15-20 minutes. The great thing about doing it in 2 parts like this is that you end up with some really cool color variation. The first set of soy skin that went into the broth, it came out nice and pink, the exact color that I wanted. The second set that went in, it's gonna be a little bit lighter color. That's gonna give us a lot of marbling in the color. I think that's gonna really come out really well. So let's get started by breaking up the tofu. So this has been pressing for a little while. It's nice and drained as much as we really need it. Now I'm just gonna break this up with a fork, but if you have like a potato masher, that'll work really well. That'll do like a really good job. I feel pretty good with this level of breaking up. There's some bigger chunks, maybe a little bit too big. Maybe I'll break it up a little bit more. It's okay if you have like a few really big chunks. If you got too many, then I just don't think it's gonna mix well in the final product. But a few big chunks will give you some really cool textures. Like when you slice it, you'll see like all of these little fibers of the soy skin and then maybe like a big chunk of tofu in there. That might be kind of neat. Now, once we have this broken up pretty good, we're gonna start with some of our seasonings. I'm gonna do about 1/2 teaspoon of garlic powder, about 1/2 teaspoon of smoked paprika. That's gonna add a lot to the color and to the flavor of this. Small drop of liquid smoke, about 1/2 teaspoon probably. I would say that's about half or 1/4 teaspoon. I'm gonna kind of mix that up really quick. Tablespoon of sesame oil, 1 teaspoon of agar powder. This is gonna help bind all of this together. 1.5 tablespoons soy sauce, 1 teaspoon maple syrup. Let's just give that a mix again. And now at this point, this should be kind of like a hammy, little like ham style tasting tofu. Oh yeah, it does have like a really unique flavor to it. I think once we add all of those other things, we're gonna have to bring in some more salt, a little bit more sweetness, and a little bit of black pepper too. But now we just have to finish up our soy skin. The very first thing that we're gonna do is we're going to drain it through a wire mesh strainer and then kind of like push this through a colander. Once we have it pushed through a colander, we're gonna start slowly mixing it into the mixture and just adding just a pinch of salt at a time as we mix it in. We wanna salt these soy skins. It's gonna help pull some moisture out of the soy skin, bring that moisture into these other flavor compounds to kind of help everything kind of like work itself together. So we have about half of the soy skin mixture mixed in with the tofu. Now let's add some more flavoring. I'm gonna add just a few turns of crushed black pepper, along with a tablespoon of dark brown sugar and another teaspoon of the mushroom seasoning. Once it's at this point, you have everything mixed in, you have everything ready to go, you can give it a try and see how ham-like it is. You want it to be fairly salty, a little sweet, and a little smoky. I don't think I have nearly enough of any of those, so I'm gonna add just a little bit more, another few drops of liquid smoke, another half teaspoon of smoked paprika, bringing the paprika up to a full teaspoon, which is what I originally thought it was gonna be. Then about a tablespoon extra of the maple syrup. It was pretty weak on the sweetness. Now everything in here, when pressed, will naturally hold itself together, but we want this to have a really nice, like almost deli sliceable quality to it. And to get that, we're gonna add some binders. The first one we're gonna do is we're gonna add a xanthan gum. That's gonna thicken all of the liquids in this. So when it presses it up, it's gonna help thicken those liquids so that way it's not runny. Kind of stays juicy, retains a lot of the liquid. Now I just have like a really small amount of water here. I'm gonna add about a teaspoon, a whole teaspoon of xanthan gum to this water, and it's gonna pretty much gel this up. Okay, so that's pretty good. That's what we want, this slimy stuff here. And then lastly, we're gonna add 2 tablespoons of tapioca starch. This is gonna do the same thing. It's gonna mix through and give us a really well-binded, thick ham. And just kind of fold that in. And it is immediately apparent about how this texture has changed. I mean, look at that. I know it doesn't look like a thick, sliceable meat yet, but it will. Now there's 2 ways to form this into this like ham log of what we're gonna do. My preferred method, which is something I just picked up, which is it's this ham maker. It's a pressure jambon. Jambon, I don't know. But it's a pressure ham maker. And really all it is it's this little tin. We're gonna use like a food safe bag on the inside to make the log. And when you stuff this all in, you use a pretty heavy duty spring loaded lid that will press this and form this into a really tight, firm log. And then the second method just involves using a sheet of parchment paper. All we're gonna do is just drop the rest of our mixture onto the parchment paper into a log and then rolling it up. Kind of like a burrito. Now what I'm gonna do is just twist the ends in different directions, which should give us like a really nicely packed log. Once we have these rolled in there, I'm just gonna fold this over and then we're gonna wrap this tight into some aluminum foil. So now that we have these both wrapped up, we're gonna let them sit for about 2 hours refrigerated. That's gonna allow the mixture to set up and kind of firm up. But then the next thing that we're gonna do is we're gonna cook it, which is gonna release a lot of juices, allow the things like the starches to firm up, the agar to firm up, and make this into its solid ham mixture. So let's let these sit refrigerated. We'll be back in 2 hours. Okay, so now this has sat, it's probably firmed up. There's no way to tell. This is under pressure at the moment. We're gonna go ahead and set this in a pot of boiling water. Now I have the water pretty much up to a boil. I'm gonna turn it down to a light simmer once I got this in there. We're gonna cook this for about 45 minutes. Once it's done boiling after 45 minutes, we're gonna remove it from the water. We're gonna set it aside and let it come down to about room temperature. And then we'll be able to check this out. Okay, so that is the next day. This has finally cooled down. I cannot wait to see how this came out. Tight in here, very tight in here. Whew. That is a solid ham log. Oh, this is perfect. I'm gonna go get the deli slicer. Look at that. Look at that deli meat. My gosh, that is a wild vegan ham. Does that look like a piece of vegan meat?